Okay, um, this is a good one. The book of Hebrews. Um, if My People Bible Reading, part 219, written about 67, 69 AD. After this, Paul is taken out of this world. Um, in other words, his soul, his body's still here somewhere, buried under the Vatican. I don't know. Anyway, maybe Peter's down there. We don't know. We'll never know. It's a big secret there. Welcome to the book of Hebrews. And we're going to take our time with this. It's got a lot of Torah in it. It's one of the last known writings of Paul, and he really knows his time is short. He really gets to the point. He makes some extremely in-your-face statements, guided through the Ruach, comes from the Son, comes from the Father. So this is directly from Yahweh. We don't attribute this to Paul. We don't attribute to any of the Torah that Paul gives as the opinion of Paul. None of it is. None of the new covenant Torah comes from anybody but through the Father. It is the Father through the Son and through other avenues that is chosen by the Father. And one of the biggest divisions in the churches today is finishes in the book of Hebrews. And try to make this short so we can get to it. In almost all of Paul's letters he wrote in the New Covenant, and he wrote so many books of the New Covenant, he ends with Hebrews, and so he really nails down the statement, we are not under the law. And by that, preachers, institutionalized churches, especially institutionalized churches, have turned it into, well, we're not under the law. That's Jewish stuff. And that's where the word Jewish is really pushed more than any other group of people in the world, is Christians making Jewish people. They're Jewish. When in fact, throughout the entire word, and especially in Hebrews, and it be brought out, it says the tribes of Israel. It's all about Israel, the 12 tribes, not just the 1/12th tribe or the Benjamites. Yeshua was Jewish, but he came to the tribe of into Judah and Benjamin. That's why they went to Bethlehem when they had to do the counting when Yeshua was born through his mother, born in Bethlehem. There was a reason for it. He intentionally came in the form of a human so he could lower himself down below that of an angel and take on all the Torah and all the sin of the world and defeat everything. And so the same people who say we are not under the law, here's what we've said all the way through: we don't sit and we're not under the law. So what Paul said is absolutely true. But what the Christianized churches and the Orthodox synagogues of Satan, and the churches of Satan don't seem to understand, and actually they do. The sheep don't understand because they just listen to whatever the pastors and ministers and priests and pagans say to them. They just suck it all in. And if it's on the news, it must be true. If it's in the Post, if it's in the New York Times, oh, it must be true. We stand on the law because as many times as Paul says we are not under the law, through almost all his letters, especially in the book of Hebrews, and we're going to point it out. I want you to pay attention to what's written. Paul turns around within a sentence or two or somewhere in the chapter and says, but you believers must follow Torah because all Torah comes from them. He's saying the Torah, we do follow Torah. We're not under it. The condemnation for breaking a Torah command is death. We're not under that condemnation. We're under judgment. We're under judgment. So just because you're a saved Christian, name it and claim it Christian, and you or any of these groups that follow and believe in the way, that's fine. And that's fine. I think it's fantastic you wear the helmet of salvation. but you don't have the full armor of God when you should, the full armor of Yahweh when you should, and we are subject to judgment. We're not free and clear. We're still living in sinful bodies. We have that voice that says, shh, follow Yahweh. And then we got the loud, screamy voice that we have to live with because we're all broken people. Our DNA is all screwed up. Our health is all screwed up. Our children are all screwed up. Everybody's screwed up. Nobody came through it. We're all going to have to go through the fire. And the fire means testing. The fire means judgment. And I would rather go through the fire of the Father than go through the fire and brimstone and hell and everything else that the demons are going to be giving it out, because they're going to be giving it out in massive numbers. They know their time is up. Hasatan knows his time is up, and he's going to throw all his slings and arrows and everything he's got at you. Yes. You think these days are bad, wait till what's coming. And for those name it and claim it pre-tribbers, that's why it says, plain and simple, there'll be a falling away in the last days, those who believed all that nonsense intentionally, because they want the easy road. They want the candy and the milk. They didn't want to eat the meat, the word. So here we are at 6 minutes and 23 seconds. Let's get into the word. Starts off right with a Torah command. In the past, Elohim spoke to our forefathers through the prophets at many times in various ways, but in these last days he has spoken to us by his Son. Now that's Torah. Everything in the last days comes through his Son, whom he appointed heir to all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of Elohim's glory and exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. And so he became as much superior to the messengers as the name he has inherited to the superiors to theirs. So he was made lower than the angels while he was on earth. And there was a reason for that. And there's a real good reason for that. Verse 7, Torah. In speaking of the messengers, he says, he makes his messengers winds, his servants flames of fire. But about his Son, he says, your throne, O Elohim, will last forever and ever, and righteousness will be the scepter of your kingdom. So as we get into this, there's 37 scriptures out there, all through most of Paul's writings. And in book of Hebrews, I'll be giving you some more Torah, but when we get to chapter 7, at verse 18 and 19, we start the idea and the understanding of what is not being under the law. For instance, the most obvious, I don't believe in Jesus, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in Satan, I don't believe in anything, I don't believe in gravity. Gravity doesn't exist because it's just a thing of the mind. Well, gravity is a law, and Yahweh made gravity on the earth for a reason. The entire solar system works on some type of black, dark energy, visible energy, gravity. It works in different dimensions. It works in black holes, which creates 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, up to 10th dimensions. Things that we don't understand, I don't understand. I just know by looking at the evidence in the sky and the earth and the Maseroth out there that Yahweh is unbelievably incredible. And man can sit there and play all the games. Stephen Hawking's and all those people. Sago. Did I say that right? They're all dead anyway. Very brilliant people. But do they know one of a billion things that Yahweh knows? No. Chapter 3, verse 9. Verse 8, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion during the time of testing in the desert, where your fathers tested and tried me for 40 years, saw what I did. Let me read that again. Verse 9, where your fathers tested and tried me, and for 40 years saw what I did. Yeshua was there. He was there one-on-one with Moses and the elders. He was there was the smoke and the fire, the The smoke during the day and the fire at night, lighting up the camp, keeping them all safe, keeping them all under the light of Yahweh and the sun. Verse 12, see to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living Elohim, but encourage one another daily, Torah, as long as it's called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. Verse 15, Torah, as has just been said today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. Didn't I just say that? Again, as a teacher and a former instructor in college, if you hear something twice, it's going to be on the test. Chapter 4, verse 1. Therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found and have fallen short of it. Paul's getting near the end of his life. He knows his time is short. It's precious that he's writing these things. Verse 7. Therefore Elohim again set a certain day, calling it today, when a long time later he spoke through David, and was said before, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. Verse 11, let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will fall by following their example of disobedience. Chapter 14, or verse 14 of chapter 4. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Yeshua, the son of Elohim, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. Verse 16, let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Now, how do we do that today? How do we approach the throne of grace with confidence? How about on your knees? Chapter 6, verse 1. Therefore, let's back up a little bit. There's some stuff in here I'm going to remind everybody. We're in chapter 5, verse 11. How much time I got? I got time. Verse 11. We have much to say about this, but it is hard to explain because you are such slow people to learn. Verse 12. In fact, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the elementary truths of Elohim's word over and over again. You need milk, not solid food. Most Christians, we call them sheeples. Verse 13, anyone who lives on milk, sheep, still being an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness. So that's why most preachers are sheep. They're on the pulpit and they call themselves a shepherd. They're sheep because they're still telling you that about Lot. And they cannot explain how he did what he did. And yet, Yahweh, through Paul, says that he's a righteous man who suffered greatly with all the nonsense and crap going on in the world. It's exactly what we're going through. No, we're not perfect. Yes, and we say different and wrong things. And yes, we must confess and pray and stay close to the Father. But we're living through a living crap. I mean, how many people today just look at what happens every day? There's some nonsense going out there, and you're just getting angry about the whole thing, but you can't. Your future is not on this earth. We are aliens. Aliens. Verse 14. But solid food is for the mature, who must by constant use, the key word is constant use, adverb, have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. Now, chapter 6, verse 1. Therefore, let us leave the elementary teachings about Messiah and go on to maturity, not laying on, again, the foundation of repentance from acts that lead to death and of faith to Elohim, instruction about baptisms, the laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, and eternal judgment. Verse 11, Torah. We want each of you to show the same diligence to the very end in order to make your hope sure. We do not want you to become lazy, but to imitate those who through faith and patience inherited what has been promised to them. So that's all about being destined, predestined. It's all over the place. And yet I have to fight the preachers and the pastors out there who don't like me saying that. All right, we'll get back to you.